Howdy Tubbers, welcome back to the Zach Life. So I've had a bunch of people asking me about the Black Mac and the well service rig, the big orange Frank's double pole. What are you going to do with it? What's the updates? So if you're new around here, this rig I'm talking about had been standing up for like 30 years and we went and rigged it down. Here's a few clips from a video where we actually rigged it down. And if you want to go watch it, you can check it out. There'll be a link in the description to the playlist, and I'm going to put a playlist together for all these videos and the future videos. So I haven't touched the Black Mac, and it's not high on my priority list. We're going to get to it, but it might be this winter, realistically, before I do much more work on it, unless I get the time. You never know. But anyway, hadn't touched it, but there has been some things going on with the orange Frank's double pole, and I have made a decision on whether or not I'm going to fix it, and the answer is I have decided that machine is going to run again. I'm going to pull a well with it. And I have sort of laid in bed at night and thought about exactly what I want to do and how I want to do it. And you know, to be quite honest, I've spent a lot of time sort of thinking, you know, business sense, where I plan on going business-wise as a company in the future, you know, in the next 10 years or so, and sort of the equipment that I need to do that, and sort of set me up to hopefully you know, do pretty well over the next decade. Anyway, I made a decision that I'm going to fix this rig. It's going to be not all that different than it is now as far as machine. It's going to be a big giant double pole with a big set of drawworks and plenty of horsepower, and I can take it out and do you know, a well service job. You know, one of the issues that we have, you know, as a company, is it's hard to find people to work for you, not just individual laborers, but other businesses. It's difficult to find, you know, bigger rigs like this. There's just not enough help to go around, and people can't hire enough people, and everything's expensive. And they're kind of expensive. You know, a rig like this costs about probably $250 an hour, and if you got to do a tubing leak or something, you know, a couple of day job's not that big a deal. You know, you're talking about a few $1,000s. But if you get into a situation where you drop tubing in a well, or you know, it's got a casing leak, you need to squeeze it and drill it out, or you know, a job that might take a couple of weeks, well, you know, 2 weeks of $250 an hour can get to be, well, it can be, you know, financially limiting. And a machine like this is exactly what I want to do with it. I don't plan on using it often, but if I've got a job that is, you know, likely to take a couple of weeks worth of well servicing work, I can take, you know, a job that would cost $20,000 to hire someone to do it, and even with hired help and fuel and everything, probably do that same job for, you know, $3,000 or something. And those jobs do come along. We spend you know, a significant amount of money on those long drawn out jobs. Anyway, I've decided this rig is going to be back similar to what it used to be, with some more hydraulics and a little bit easier to work, and you know, just whatever. But also, I'd like to build a substructure, and I'll explain what all this means in a minute. Just hang with me. I'd like to build a little substructure for it that I could back this up on with a rotary table and actually drill a well with it. Now, if you're unfamiliar with rigs like this, there's two distinct types of rigs. One is a well servicing rig, which is what this machine is. It is a rig that's designed to work on a well that's already drilled. You pull tubing, you pull rods, you do, you know, whatever you need to do. A well drilling rig is a well that actually drills the physical hole through the rock and through the ground that you set casing in and make a well out of. And the two rigs generally are incapable of doing what the other machines do. They don't cross paths, at least not usually. And in my situation, I think that I can take and build this machine to do both, and do both pretty well for what I intend to do with it, for what I need it to do. And so anyway, we're going to talk about all that in a minute, but I want to take you out there. Let's go take a look at it. I want to show you what's been done, where we're at, and kind of what's coming up next. Well, let's take a look and walk around this big old hunk. So this is actually the third video chronologically that I've started. We got two more that are already rolling, and the first one is we're going to overhaul the fuel pump, and then the second one is going to be, for me personally, what I'm going to work on is we're going to start from right here and move forward, and I'm gonna get everything fixed. We're gonna work on the engine, the transmission, hoses. You can see I already got a set of batteries up there. That's all coming in a couple of videos, but we want to get that part of this machine done before I work on anything on the back. All right, so coming back to the back here, I want to show you I've hired a fella to do some welding for me, and I'm in sort of a time crunch, time restraint here in the idea that I have none of it extra. I have no time. Anyway, I hired this done. I'm really pleased with it, and he put a new floor. Y'all remember this was all broke out. The way that this shaft thing, had the shivs up here, we'll show all that when we put it together, but it was poorly mounted from the factory. Anyway, I've got this. It's a 3/4 inch wall. I believe it was 5x5 or 6x6 tubing, and we have welded and gusted the crap out of it to the frame. And then we've built these arms that come up here straight. And anyway, this will make all this super stout. And anyway, he got this done. We put he built the walkway over here. The operator stand was sort of down here, and if I make a drilling rig out of this, it will actually need to be up here. But anyway, we got this done. I wanted to get this done first. So I wanted to get all of this done. This was the first step back here. And really the biggest reason is it's got to have a ton of pneumatic lines and valves and crap that go to everything. Of course the rig part, but also the rear ends and stuff. And I wanted to get all the welding done on this floor so that if I ran a whole bunch of wires and hoses and stuff in the frame, I wouldn't have to worry about melting all that when we put the floor on. A sandline drum holds the cable if you got to run the cable all the way to the bottom to swab or whatever you need to do, and its controls are up here. Now for running it, this is a better place because you're away from the mess, and you're the well's back there. It's just sort of a better, less messy, I should say, situation. But the problem is when you rig the thing up and down, you have to be running from that stand, that operating position to this operating position to let the cable out or whatever. And I plan on taking all of this with the dual brake handles and bringing everything back here somewhere. At a later date, I'll build a console. It'll have all the valves, the gauges, the controls. We'll have 2 brake handles, one for the tubing drum and one for the sand drum. Of course, all the air controls, all the hydraulics, that's all got to be designed and thought through and laid out. But that's all going here. But as I said, I want to get the floor put down before I ran all the air hoses. And I was going to say too, I plan on tapping this. I'm going to use this as an air tank. Anyway, get all the air hoses done, and this will be the next step after we get done with the engine and up there. I want to make it to where we can drive it. We're going to make sure the tires are good enough, and I'm probably going to take it back to my house. It'd be easier to work on at my house. So I got a quick story I got to tell. It's, I think, this is really the weirdest thing ever about the guy I hired to do the welding for me out there. So a friend of mine gave me this fella's number. I never had met him before a couple weeks ago, and said, you need to call him. He probably would fit your program great. He's a pretty good welder. He's built a bunch of rigs. He knows kind of how they're supposed to be. He's probably a good guy to bounce ideas off of. He's put a bunch of them together. He's a kind of a machinist, welder, mechanic, kind of like you. Anyway, so I called him, and ultimately that's what happened. I explained to him what I wanted. He said, well, we need to put channel here, and we can do this. And he just did a great job. I just turned him loose, and that's what he came up with. Well, anyway, the second day he was working up here for me, I got a big TV up here that is a computer monitor, but it's a smart TV. And a lot of times, there's a bunch of paperwork I do, and I'll be at this desk, and I'll turn YouTube on, and there is several people that, when they put out a video, I always watch them. They're always my kind of thing. And one of them, Jay Paydirt. Well, anyway, Jeff put a video out. It's up there kind of just running. I'm not really paying attention to it, doing paperwork. And he starts talking about this tool he's got that Mike Jordan down there in Texas sent him. Jeff gets to talking, and it's kind of this ice tong looking thing. Anyway, I thought, there's no way that it's the same guy that's hired to work for me. And so I walked out there and asked him, I said, you ever watch YouTube? And he said, oh yeah, I've seen a few of your videos. And I said, you ever watch Jeff Paydirt, Jay Paydirt? And he's like, yeah. And he starts talking. I sent Jeff this tool about 3 or 4 months ago. I keep hoping he's going to do a video about it, show it. It's a deal to pick up those idler pulleys on a cat dozer. I think Mike used to do a bunch of welding and build some tools for Caterpillar too. There's a big cat house in Wichita Falls. But anyway, I was like, what in the world? Small world, what's the chance, of hiring some guy, and then, a friend of mine's a YouTuber that's, halfway across the country is talking about it the same day. I texted Jeff, kind of told him the story. I don't quite think he understood how shocking that was to me. But anyway, that's the backstory of Mike, and what a small world we live in. So I wanted to draw some pictures. I want to spin you around here and show you. I need to kind of explain what I want to build. I'd like to get you a visual, and well, let's do it. So I'll need to draw you a couple of pictures here. You'll have to forgive my inability to draw, but on these shallow wells, and I know that's a relative term, but these wells around here less than 2,000 feet, a lot of times companies buy and use they're effectively converted water well rigs, and they're a truck mounted all-inclusive little machine. And so you'll have a rig here's a crane carrier cab, and it's got a frame, and then back here you'll have the rotary table, and then you've got a derrick that sits up here, something like this, and goes down the road. And it's got all the cross braces in the derrick, and there's an engine right here. And basically you drive this to where you want to drill a well, and you stand the derrick up, and you've got a mobile drilling rig. Everything's sort of inclusive. Of course, you've got to have a pipe trailer and a mud pump and stuff. And anyway, these are probably the best way of doing it, especially to do it commercially, because they're quick to move. They're usually not all that stout, and that's always an issue, getting hung up or stuff breaking. They're usually not real strong, and you got a drawworks here, the cable that goes up over the top of the rig, runs the blocks and whatnot. Forget the window. Now, in the old days, and the big rigs are still this way, but in the old days, the sort of medium-sized rigs, and also even some of the small rigs, were called jackknife rigs. And these jackknife rigs had a substructure, and it's this big old heavy-duty iron thing. The ground level's here. And when you move the rig, you disassemble the rig. And a lot of these old jackknife rigs were actually double pole rigs, and those poles that are on my rig actually came off of Wichitech's drilling rig. Anyway, these are like the big giant rigs you see like on TV or whatnot, but they're just smaller. Anyway, you've got this substructure, and it's got all these big old heavy duty I-beams in it or whatever, and this is varying heights. They can be sometimes as short as maybe 4 foot tall, and of course the big rigs sometimes are like 35 feet tall or something. They're 3 stories tall. And anyway, it's got what's called an A-leg on it. It's this thing that erects, and then you take a couple of trucks and set your derrick up here, or your poles. Actually, this is not drawn correctly. It actually comes down at pins right here. So you got your A-leg here, and then your derrick would pin like right here, and the derrick goes sort of like this. Anyway, you set this up here, and it's got pins, and you drop it in. Anyway, it completely comes apart, and then you've got your engines. You set your engines up on here. This should be bigger, and your draw works, and they get bolted down, and then when you stand it up, of course the derrick's standing up, and then the rotor table is mounted back here. And anyway, this was a really old school way of doing the small rigs, and it's still how they do the really big rigs. And what I want to do is sort of a combination of these two. So what I want to do is we've got my rig here. I guess the drawworks are kind of right here, and then there's a floor, and we've got the arms that come up, and the poles pin, and the poles run up here, sort of like that. And what I'm going to do, normally this would, the ground would be right here, is I'm going to build a small substructure for this thing. And basically, I'm just going to take a bunch of a bunch of I-beam, and this is all down the road. This is, you know, probably a couple of years down the road. Is to take a bunch of beam and build a ramp type thing that looks sort of like this. And the rotary table mounts in here, and this is all, you know, big heavy duty beam, and this is going to be relatively short. You know, we're probably thinking like 36 inches tall or something. And so basically what you'll do is, you know, this ramp probably is more like this, is you'll take this rig and you'll back it up onto this substructure. And then it'll have to have some type of big jacks or something that picks the front tire up. You know, the front tire will be dangling, say, 3 feet off the ground. Anyway, then when you set the rig up, you know, and the poles are up like this, the rotary table will be made into this substructure, and it'll probably either be hydraulically driven off the rig or maybe electric, or I've actually seen this done before where they had a small, you know, little diesel engine or whatever that, you know, that just drove the rotary table. And so this is my plan, and if I build this, it's not going to be something that's going to be real easy to set up. This is not what I would want if I planned on running a drilling rig. But this is going to, you know, after I have this pulling machine, you know, this well servicing rig finished, I can probably build this for another, you know, 20 or 30 grand, and I will have effectively turned my pulling machine into a drilling rig. The other advantage to this is having this substructure off the ground. It just gives you a lot more room. The little lay down truck mounted rigs, like we were talking about, the small little rigs, you know, everything's short, you're always in the mud, and with these you can sort of put walkways around everything. It is better to work on. There just takes more steps to set it up. But this is kind of my plan here for how to make a drilling rig out of this. Well, that's the plan as far as that machine goes. I'm going to try to make something back out of that hunk of junk iron. You know, I originally bought those poles. I was wanting to put together sort of a jackknife type old school rig. I thought I could piece it together relatively inexpensively. I wanted the poles. I already actually had a different set of drawworks, but in hindsight I ended up owning it, and it will be a useful piece of equipment to me as a pulling machine. And I think the smartest thing for me to do is to build a little substructure and make a kind of dual purpose rig out of it. Kind of looking forward, you know, I want to make the engine run. That's going to be, you know, I got the fuel pump overhauled, but I want to make the engine run good, and I'm going to probably release both those videos the same day. I don't think anybody's going to enjoy watching me work on the pump. It was pretty boring. I thought somebody might want to see what the guts of a Cummins PT pump looks like. Anyway, when I get that done, I'll release both of those. I don't think it'll probably be next week. It may be in a couple weeks. I'm trying to plan a vacation here in about a month, and to be quite frank, I'm interested in sort of having that ready to go. I got to do some work on the RV, and I know I've said this for a year now. It's been almost a year. I want to sort of have a finale to the RV series, do some honest reviews. There was a few things I wanted to sort of change, and I started and hadn't got that done. I got to get that finished before we kind of knock those last couple of videos out. The water and all the rain has really messed with my ability to do much. There's some stuff I'm probably going to work on next week. It's finally supposed to be dry, but it's going to be hot. I've got some electrical stuff blowing up. We've had an absolute nightmare with lightning. I'd like to do some videos about that. Guess that's it. I just kind of wanted to show you what I was thinking on this rig. I had some people want an update, and that's the size of it. It may be a couple of years before this whole project's done, but that's the you know, if you don't set goals and start climbing mountains, you're never going to get to the top, and that's kind of what I want to start here. I'm done rambling. I appreciate you watching. Like, share, subscribe. I promise I'll have some better videos out at some point. It's just it's been difficult to do much the last couple months around here. It's been nothing but a swamp. I will get you on the next one.